Once again, it is good to be in the house of the Lord this morning, to gather together as a people called out by the name of Jesus Christ, to worship Him, to give Him thanks and praise in all things, to sing unto Him, and to delight ourselves in His presence. And thank you to all of you who have been praying for us over the last couple of weeks, especially as you prayed for Deb. Thank you, Tim. We have had a few struggles over the last few weeks, but the Lord has been good and merciful, and we continue to covet your prayers and ask you to be considering us in this day. And I can't think of a better passage of Scripture that applies to our lives over the last few weeks and months, and probably most of yours as well, except for the passage of James chapter 4, starting in verse 13 and going to the end of the chapter. You will notice in your bulletin that the title for this particular passage is not framed in the form of a question. There's no question mark at the end of the title. It is simply a statement of fact that forms the substance of the message that James will bring in these 5 verses 13 through 17. You know, it's all how you say the sentence, right? It's all how you pronounce it. Who knows what tomorrow brings? Or, who knows what tomorrow brings? Whether you go up at the end or whether you go down at the end will indicate whether you think it's a question or not. It's simply not being put as a question. I purposely did not include a question mark here, because it is not being posed as a question. I'm not asking you if you know what tomorrow brings. It's not being posed as a question. It's being posed as a statement of fact. No one knows what tomorrow may bring, especially you. No one knows what tomorrow will bring. These 5 verses are, in my opinion, a hub. Now, they could be a transition. They could be a transition from chapter 4 to chapter 5. It could simply be that James is moving on to the next subject, and so he switches thoughts in these verses to kind of move on to where he's going. But the problem is that when you start reading chapter 5, you realize that he simply just picks up the same subject and continues on. The subject of worldliness and materialism and all of its consequences simply continues into the first 6 verses of chapter 5. So if we're going to call it a transition, it's not really transitioning anything. So I'm inclined to see it rather as a hub around which both 4 and 5 spin. It's sort of like a propeller, right? You have a hub in the center of the propeller that's attached to the engine, and then coming from that hub are 2 blades coming out from that. And it's around that center hub that those 2 blades spin. One of those blades is chapter 4, one of those blades is chapter 5. So it's around that central hub that this is revolving. It's a reminder of something. It's a reminder. The key idea here is that this is a reminder, a truth around which we all inherently know. A truth we all inherently know. We need to be reminded of it, but nonetheless, it is a truth that we all inherently know. And it's around this truth, this central hub, this reminder in the center, around which our discussion of worldliness or materialism must revolve. In other words, in many ways, it's a bottom line sort of thing. A bottom line regarding life that affects the way that we think, or ought to affect the way that we think. How we approach the topic of worldliness or materialism or a focus on this world is entirely based on how much of this reminder we really remember. And so that's where we're going. Now, the actual verses themselves, the 5 verses themselves, can be broken into 3 distinct parts. First, there's a substance to this reminder, which is the truth itself. And then there's a soul in this reminder, which is the reality that undergirds this truth about life. And then James closes with a solution to this reminder, the way that believers are to consider this reality in light of the way that they live and interact with the world. So here is the core around which our view of the material world must revolve. Okay, so let me read the 5 verses now, and then we'll get into the details. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him, it is sin. Now, as I said, the first part of this is the substance. What is the substance of this reminder? What is the truth at the core of this? Now, he starts off by this interesting phrase, come now, you who say. Come now, you who say. James draws his audience close to listen carefully to his wisdom. Remember, this book was, way back at the beginning of this letter, we called it the Proverbs of the New Testament, right? It was one of those ideas that James is full of all these various bits of wisdom and knowledge. Well, this is really one of the best of all of the letter. And so it is wisdom such as this that James desires his audience to gather around and to hear. Come now, come here, hear me, come here. The Greek word that's used here is ago, which means to lead or to bring or to carry. Literally, the word means pay attention, okay? Literally, the word means come and see what I have to say and listen to me because what I'm about to say is profound, okay? Come now, you who say. But James also makes it clear who he wants to converse with. Come now, you who say. Okay, so he comes to his audience and he says, there are some of you who are saying this. So come now and hear. Those who might be inclined then to say the words that he then makes up to follow this. So he says, come now, you who say. And then he gives to us, and most modern English translations put quotations around the next piece, say something to the effect of, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Now, James draws up a quote that is an example of his wisdom, okay? So he makes up something here. The words are an analogy. You know what an analogy is, right? Something is like something else. So when you see people using this word like, which seems to be a very popular word today in our culture, as though it's every third word in some people's language, everything is an analogy. Well, not everything is an analogy, but that's how we live now. So James places an analogy on the lips of an interlocutor. Remember that word, an interlocutor? Someone who might be questioning him, someone who might be wanting to, at this point, stand up and raise his hand and say, I have an objection, or I have a question, or I have something I want to add to this. And so James is anticipating such an individual. So he puts these fictional words upon the lips of an interlocutor. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go into this place or that place. James makes up a quote from a fictional individual saying this in order to address the fundamental flaw in the statement itself and make a larger point from it. Let me say that again. James makes up a quote. Just imagine somebody saying this, and he puts it on the lips of some fictional individual to then turn around and deal with the fundamental flaw in the statement itself. So he says, someone of you might say this, for example. Let me show you why you ought not to say that. Let me show you what the flaw is in that. Jesus did this a lot, you remember, in the course of his public ministry. He used parables, and he often spoke from the fictional characters in his parables. He often put words on the lips of the characters in his stories. You know, you could pick up just about any one of them, like the prodigal son, The son speaks, the father speaks, the older brother speaks. Everybody has words in the parables. It's a fictitious parable. It's utterly fictitious people. But as part of the storytelling process, you put words on the lips of individuals in order to make a point from that. That's what James is doing. James understands a fundamental reality that he needs to express at this point. Once again in his letter, James wants to communicate something powerful. He wants to say something that needs to be said. So he uses this particular method in order to make the reader listen, to get the attention of those who are listening to him. As someone in the churches that he wrote to is reading this, it would perk up the ears of the individual listeners, like, oh, I might say that, or I'm saying that, or I've said that, something to that effect. And so he's doing that in order to get the attention of his readers. Now, if you look closely at the statement, the quotation, whatever you want to call it, the words are from the mouth of a fictitious businessman, someone who is making plans into the future, right, today or tomorrow, to go to some random town, such and such a town, and spend some time there, say a year, let's spend a year there, and open up a business in order to turn a profit, okay? I mean, that's literally what he's saying. Today or tomorrow, sometime in the future, we'll go into such and such a place, some random town, and we'll spend a year there, give or take, and trade and make a profit. So we'll open a business. We'll start a business practice of some sort in that particular place. Now, question. Is James here condemning Christians engaging in business in general? I mean, that should be one of the first questions you ought to ask when you read this, right? Because it's clear that James wants to say something about such a person saying such a thing. So is James turning and saying, listen, any of you who are saying that you're going to go into some town and start a business, that's anti-Christian? And the answer is no. He's not. Probably not. Again, the quote itself is designed to be fictitious to make a point, right? It's just somebody saying something that he's trying to make a point about, other than about some business practice. In fact, the point isn't about business at all. It's not even mentioned after the fictitious phrase. So it's highly unlikely that James is condemning someone saying, I really want to go and start a business. So James probably doesn't have a problem with someone going and making a profit. He's not condemning that per se. He is going to use the example to make his point, but he's not attempting to say business practices are wrong. So that leads to a second question then. So is James only condemning certain people, meaning those who are engaged in some sort of future-looking ordeal, like a business of some sort? And again, I think the answer is no. The point of the entire pericope will demonstrate that James is actually addressing his entire audience. He's addressing everybody that he's writing to. The quote is just an example that he is using of one possible way that the Christians at the other end might express an idea. Okay, see where we're going here. It's not as though James is condemning businessmen for making decisions to start businesses. And it's not James condemning people who are forward-looking and making plans into the future. But rather, it's James saying, all of you have a particular reality. This happens to be one way it's expressed, but I'm simply using this as an example to all of you in the way that you're thinking. So the quote itself is just an example. The words are the kind of thing that anyone in the audience could say, but in different contexts. Any one of us could say these words, but in different contexts. Sure, there are businessmen who make plans to open a business, right? But there are some of you who have plans to do other things. Well, this year I plan to sell my house and move here, or I have this plan to do this or to do that. We all are forward-looking creatures. We're all forward-looking creatures. We all make plans, and we all make plans about what our future will hold. We all look forward to what we might do in the days ahead. There are probably some of you that have very specific plans of something that you hope will happen in the next year. And you're working towards that particular goal, right? I bet I could go around the room and I could get every single one of you to admit that there's something that you are planning and looking forward to in the future. Whether it be something as simple as a vacation, or moving to a new place, or having a child, or getting married. The list goes on, doesn't it? Right? See, James is not condemning just one kind of person. He's using this as an example to say, listen, the natural condition of the human person is to look forward into the future and make plans, and very often, and all of you will agree with me on this, that it's the anticipation that's even more exciting than the actual event. I know I've experienced this many, many times. You probably have too, right? You plan for a vacation for a year. You're excited about going on this vacation. You've made all the plans, and then you go on the vacation, and you come back home more exhausted than when you left. And you go, why in the world did we do that? You know, for those of you who have kids, you take your kids to Disneyland. Boy, that sounds really cool, doesn't it? Until you do it. This is who we are. This is what we are. We are forward-looking creatures. But there's a fundamental problem in that reality that we need to consider. Okay? There's a fundamental reality in that we need to consider. And that's where James is going when he says, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. Notice he doesn't raise it as a question. He states it outright. He states it outright. You do not know what tomorrow will bring. You are not omniscient. I hate to burst your bubble here, but you are not omniscient. You do not know. As a human, you are incapable of truly knowing what tomorrow may bring. You are incapable of truly knowing what tomorrow may bring. You do not know. I'm going to bring an example that's so obvious that you're probably going to drum me right out of the preacher corps, right? Who would have thought waking up in the morning on January 1st of 2020 that any of what we're experiencing today would have been part of our future? I guarantee you there's absolutely no one in this room who would have predicted a massive pandemic, race riots, etc. None of you would have predicted that. We do not have a clue what tomorrow will bring. Every day we are surprised by things that come our way that we could not possibly have anticipated. Now let me just, for a moment, let me just draw a parenthesis right here, okay? A little theological aside, I'm calling it. Let's consider for just a moment the difference between the nature of God and the nature of man when it comes to time. See, God exists outside of time. Time is an invented construct for God. It exists outside of himself. He is not subject to the laws of time. He invented the concept of time. He created it in a physical world that we have. He exists outside of him. I've said this many times before. For God, there is no past or future. For God, there is no past or future. All things exist before his eyes eternally. All things that happen in time and space are before his eyes. He is observing today and tomorrow exactly at the same quote-unquote time. He sees all before him. He's looking today at the essence of what took place 10,000 years ago, and he's looking today at the essence of what's going to take place 10,000 years from now. It's before him. He has an eternal present. Everything is before his eyes. It is utterly wrong theologically to say to answer the question, how does God know what happens in the future? By saying, well, God just looks down the corridors of time. That is wrong, theologically. It's wrong to understand God that way. God does not turn his head to the left and look down and see the future and then turn his head to the right and see the past. No, everything is before his eyes. It is here in the now, in the eternal present of God. We are exactly the opposite of that. We have no present, only a future and a past. We have no present. There is no present for us. Because even the words that I'm speaking right now are moving from the future into the past. See, those words are now in the past, as are those. And now those are too. Oh, and now those went into the past too. I could do this all day. No pun intended. See, we have no present. To us, we are creatures who are moving from the future into the past, and the present is a tiny, tiny slice of the very moment you're living in, but it passes you by so fast, you don't even notice it. You move from future into past constantly. For God, all of time is eternally present. For us, all of time is either past or future. Because all time exists before God, he knows it all perfectly. Because all time exists before God, he knows it perfectly. Because all time is beyond man, he knows very little of it. Because all time is eternally before God, he can know it perfectly. But because all time is beyond us, we can know very little of it. We cannot know what the future holds. We might make a prediction as to what tomorrow may bring, but we'll find ourselves more wrong than right. And I hate to tell you this, I really do, but you also have no clue of what's in the past. The fact is that most of us do not actually remember the past the way it actually occurred. Psychologists tell us that the vast majority of people actually remember things from the past very differently than how they actually occurred. Because our view of things is based on our presuppositions and lenses and corruptions. And so when we store away memories, we store them away through that lens first, and then we store them the way we think they occurred. And I'll give you an example. I'm treading on thin ice here. But my wife and I had an argument the other day. Well, not an argument, but a strong disagreement, because she remembered that I dropped her off at one place differently than where I remember dropping her off. And I'm absolutely convinced that I dropped her off where I think I did, and she's absolutely convinced that I dropped her off in a different place. We don't either one of us really remember the exact circumstance because our minds are such that we cannot. One of the problems with corrupted mind, corrupted by sin, is that we do not store our memories the way we really think we do, the way they really happened. I think we may be quite shocked by some of the actual events that have taken place in our lives when the Lord shows us our lives again and we go, oh, I don't remember it that way. That's not how I remember it taking place. So in other words, we are not omniscient, we are not God. Our fundamental problem is that we are not able to understand time, and therefore we cannot know what tomorrow will bring. There's no way for us to know what tomorrow will bring. We cannot see into the future, and even if we could, dare I say, see into the future, we would not see it perfectly. We would not see it in a way that we'd really understand what's coming. So the fundamental flaw in the fictitious quote, the fundamental flaw in this fictitious quote that James brings is that the person speaking it cannot say with certainty that any of it is even possible. Today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there. You don't know what tomorrow may bring. You don't know whether you'll be allowed to even go into that town. You have no idea whether you could spend a year there or not. And you certainly have no idea whether you'll make a profit when you get there. There's nothing in that sentence that is absolutely sure from the perspective of the individual speaking it. Which leads then to the soul of this reminder. The substance of the reminder is you have no idea what the future holds, but the soul underneath that, the reason why that is far deeper. And James brings it out by asking a rhetorical question. This is a question designed to deep dive into his point. The soul of the matter is why I'm calling it the soul. What is the real problem that we have? And he asks it this way. What is your life? What is your life? The key word there is the word is. Okay? What is your life? What is your life? What is your life? Now, as I've used this word many, many times before, but it comes up again, this is an ontological question. This is a question of what you are. This is a question of being, substance. What are you? Fundamentally, ontologically, what are you really? What is your life really? Why can we not plan out our future? Why do we have no control over our destiny? The fundamental flaw of the fictitious statement is to believe that we actually can control our destiny, and guess what? Every day proves we can't. But the fundamental core soul of that is the question, what is your life? And the answer that James gives is this. This life is but a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. You know what a mist is, right? A fog. A fog. A dew. Again, James uses an analogy, right? Your life is like what? Like a mist, like a fog, like a dew. An analogy based on a simple atmospheric condition, right? During the night, as the temperature goes down, and that temperature approaches the dew point of the atmosphere, the water in the atmosphere begins to coalesce. That's not the right word. But it begins to form into water droplets. And if they're small enough, they will, of course, hover in the air and clump together and become a fog or a mist. If you've ever driven down I-10, 6 o'clock in the morning, you probably will drive through fog banks, particularly as you go across rivers and other places where there's plenty of water to produce them. That's a fog. It's a mist. It's a substance with a very short existence of a tenuous nature with little lasting impact. It's a substance with a very short existence of a tenuous nature with little lasting impact. A fog is short-lived, isn't it? The morning fog dissipates as the air temperature rises, and the atmosphere is now able to support holding more water. As the dew point, as the temperature rises away from the dew point, eventually the water re-evaporates back into the atmosphere because it can hold more, and the fog disappears. And just like us, or just like the fog, I should say, we are short-lived. Very short lives. In fact, as one pundit once put it, if you walk around in a graveyard, all of the people's lives in the graveyard are represented by a dash. A dash. The dash between the day they were born and the date that they died. The little dash. That's what we are. I happen to be one of those young earth fellows. I know, I'm weird. Let's assume for a moment that human civilization is about 10,000 years. Now, I know some of you want to say it's 6,000, well, whatever. 10,000, let's just use 10,000, a nice round number. Let's say that you live to be 100 years old. 100? How many of you expect to live to be 100? I don't see many hands going up. But if you did manage to live to 100 years old, across a 10,000 year period of time, you would have experienced only 1% of the entirety of human civilization. 99% of all that has taken place in human interactions on this planet, you would not have been a part of. Your life is short. Your life is short. Oh, and if the evolutionists are right that we've been on this planet for 10 million years, what percentage is that for you? Short, but also tenuous. I love that word, tenuous. Just as a fog has little substance, so our lives have little substance day to day. Most of our lives are lived in the mundane. How much of your life do you spend just surviving? You have to go to work. You have to get the kids up and get them dressed. You got to teach them. You got to do this. You got to do that every day, every day. I remember the great line from a movie I saw years and years ago when the husband said to the wife, "My whole life is have to." Our lives are mundane, just getting along, doing what we got to do. We spend so much of our time. It's one of the great discoveries of those coming out of college into the real world. Because you see, when you're a kid and you're off in school and you have all this time to enjoy your life, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, and they never tell you this, adult life becomes mundane. Day after day, I got to go to work, I got to buy food, I got to make food, I got to pay the bills, I got to do this, I got to do that, blah, blah, blah. Our lives are tenuous and mundane, and they're also of little impact. Just as a fog produces little. You know, you can drive right through it and it doesn't even wet your car, right? You can drive right through a fog, doesn't even wet your car. Just as a fog produces little, so our lives have little lasting impact over time. How many people have lived on this planet in the last 10,000 years? You have any idea? Some have estimated roughly 20 to 30 billion people have lived on this planet in the 10,000 years. I think it's less than that, but let's just say 10 billion. How many of the 10 billion people that have lived on this planet do you know their name? Oh, there's a lot of them that you know their name, right? Alexander the Great. Okay, there's a guy that we know. Nero, there's a guy that we know, right? But really, of the 10 billion, what percentage of those people are remembered today? One of the things I love to do, and I'm really morbid, but I love to walk through cemeteries. I've always loved walking through cemeteries. I always try to find the oldest headstone in the place. That's my goal. Weird hobby, right? It's kind of fun here, but it's a lot more fun in England because you can find headstones from the 1300s in some of the cemeteries around little churches. And as I walk around, the reason I do, I want to walk around and look at those headstones and I say, I wonder who this person was. Who was this person? There's a name, right? There's a person, there's dust left of the individual, especially from the 1300s. Who was this person? Who was he or she? Or as you see the gravestone of a baby that has died, tragically, you find a lot of those in cemeteries. You ask, what would this one have been? The fact is our lives produce very little over the long term. Think about it. Our lives are short. Our lives are tenuous. Our lives have little impact in the world. Now, you're probably doing like this, la, 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 la. I don't want to hear that. See, the fact of the matter is we all know this to be true. Every single human walking around on the face of the earth knows all of what I just said to be true. Yes, we will do our level best to say, I don't want to believe that, but it's true. Why are human beings terrified to confront it? Why? Well, you know, for the unregenerate man, the man who's never been born again by the Spirit of God, this is all there is. This is it. For such a man, this is the life. This is all that he can experience. He's forced to believe that this life is all there is. He's been told by his secular education and the secular culture in which he lives and the secular ideas in his heart and his mind that this is it. This is life. You better go make the most out of it that you can. Do whatever you can to make the most out of it. Make some meaning out of your life in some way. Strive in some sort of way to make something out of your existence. Or again, as another actor once said, it's all about the experiences. So go get as many experiences as you can. That's the typical human walking around the face of the earth. This life is short. I don't have much time. And I'm terrified that one of you might infect me with some disease that kills me. I don't have much time. So I'm going to lock myself in the basement. You see, he actually believes the fictitious statement above. He believes what James just said. He believes it because he has to. Because this is all he's got. I've got to do this. I've got to make something of my life. And so I'm going to go into this little town tomorrow and I'm going to start a business. I'm going to make a profit and I'm going to enjoy my life. He actually believes. The unregenerate man has nothing else. But here's where it goes from being bad news to good news. All right? The regenerate man has an eternal life. He knows, the regenerate man, that is, knows that this life is a small fraction of his existence. It's only a tiny little window of the totality of his existence. The regenerate man has an eternal life. The Christian, therefore, is to think about this life very differently than the unregenerate man. Both the regenerate man and the unregenerate man know that this physical life in this world is short and tenuous and filled with the mundane. But the difference between the two is how we understand that. The regenerate man understands his connection to this temporal world in much different ways than the man who only has this life to live. Because if this is the only life you have, then I'm telling you, stop wasting your time coming to church. On Sunday mornings, grab your golf clubs and get out on the course. I don't care if it's raining. Do what you got to do to experience everything, because this is all you've got. But for those of us who know Jesus Christ by faith, we are to look very differently at our lives and say, wait. Yes, it may be short. But we have an eternal life, not a temporal one. So that's what causes James to say what he says in verse 15, which becomes what I call the solution. Instead, you ought to say. Okay, notice who he's writing to. He's writing to believers, and he's saying to them, listen, instead of that statement, the fictitious statement, today or tomorrow we'll go another time, instead you ought to say, he rephrases his fictitious statement with a significant difference. A significant difference, specifically. And the whole statement is designed to focus on this bit. If the Lord wills. It is a recognition on the part of the believer that all of life is under the sovereign will of God, and He determines the outcome of all of our plans. Now you'll notice that, as I said, James shortens the statement to focus on that phrase specifically. So the solution here is simple. The Christian is to recognize that this life, for the elect, is to do the will of God in all things, to sacrifice one's personal goals and desires for the overarching will of God, to substitute our own desires for the desires of God. Why? because this isn't the only life we have. We are not in a situation as believers where we need to cram as much experience as we can into this life, because this ain't it. There's more to come. Yes, the unregenerate man has no choice but to cram as much as he can into this life, but we don't. We are to submit ourselves to the will of God in all things because we have a larger outlook. Think about Jesus in the garden. What does he say? If there's any way for this cup to pass from me, let it be not my will, but thine be done. The Son is saying, it's not about my will, it's about the will that you have established. Yes, we are free to pursue our dreams, yes, but we must be willing to sacrifice them for the will of God over our lives. We must be willing to say, look, yeah, I would like to go and do this or that, but only if the Lord wills it to be the case. See, the problem is that most of our dreams are nothing more than selfish ambition and worldliness. All right, now this is the two propeller blades that spin around this core. In chapter 4, we have spent a bunch of time, 6 weeks in fact, examining this idea of worldliness and the reality of worldliness amongst us. And we're going to continue that thought as we start into chapter 5. Most of our dreams are nothing more than selfish ambition and worldliness. As material creatures born of this planet, we become focused on the pleasures of the world from which we spring, and we forget that we are but a mist. We forget that just a mist passing through. So we become myopic. We become myopic. You know what myopic is, right? Self-focused. The myopic individual, I'm myopic by sight. I wear contact lenses that allow me to see at a distance because I have no distance vision. I'm nearsighted. Okay, that's myopathy. I can see here but not here. And that's what we become. We become myopic. It's all about our happiness, our success, our health, our wholeness. It all becomes about us. As human creatures living in this world, we live in the material world, thus we assume the material world is all there is. It's our happiness, our success, our health, and that's why James says you boast in your arrogance. You actually believe that what you are pursuing in this world matters in the least. You actually believe that it matters that you start that business and turn a profit. You actually believe that it matters that that or this or whatever you have planned is actually going to make some difference. We boast in our arrogance that we are entitled to a life of meaning or a life of ease or a life of luxury or a life of experiences or whatever. We actually believe that. And James goes so far as to say such arrogance is boasting, such boasting is evil. Coming from a believer, now look, from an unregenerate man, it is what it is. Because that's all he has. For him, it is. But for us who know better, it becomes evil. And that's why James finishes the section by saying what he says. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. It becomes sinful for the believer to think this is all I have and this is the world I need to have experiences and I need to somehow accomplish something in order to matter. The believer is condemned because he knows the right thing. He knows life is short. And we must make the most of it for the glory of God. Not for ourselves, but for him. And so he knows that it is sin to focus myopically about himself rather than the will of God. So here's the bottom line, folks. Listen. Yes, this life is short. This life is tenuous, yes. You have short years on this planet. And the older you get, the more you realize that. The older you get, the more you realize I've got a lot more days behind me than I do in front of me. Life is tenuous. Look away from yourself and see what God would will for your life to produce. What would God have from you that will last into eternity? There's a lot of things we can pursue in this world, most of them good, and good things to pursue. But what will make a lasting impact into eternity? Not that our names would be remembered in time and space, because the only name that should be remembered, the only name that ever will be remembered in time and space, is the name of Jesus. Not to pursue our name, but to pursue a life in which what we are doing matters for eternity. Otherwise, the regenerate man wastes this life. Jesus said it this way, and I'll close with this parable. Luke chapter 12. The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops." And he said, "I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And then I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'"